So my name is Julia Rooney. I'm the Marketing and Content Specialist for your BBB, serving Southern Alberta and East Kootenay. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina, the Nakota Nations, the Métis Nation, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. Please note today's session will be recorded, and please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions you may have throughout the event. A quick thank you to our trust sponsors, Johnson Inc. and Peregrine General Pest Control, as well as our in-kind sponsor, Wendy Ellen. So your BBB has partnered with Amylite Analytics, Coalition Insurance, and AWIN Insurance to have a candid discussion on cybersecurity and your organization's risk journey. Before we jump in, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. So Kara Wolf is the CEO of Amylite Analytics, a custom AI-powered software and hardware development firm specializing in data analytics, cybersecurity, and physical security integration. She is an experienced leader, author, and speaker with more than 15 years of executive leadership. She has extensive experience serving at the advisory board and directory level for many organizations, including the Council of Innovation and Entrepreneurial Leadership at the University of Calgary and the International Association of VCISOs. Kara was also awarded Top 20 Women in Cybersecurity 2021 by IT World Canada. Joel Lozen is sorry if I said your name wrong there, Joel, is a 10-year insurance veteran with experience in both broking and underwriting commercial and risk managed businesses. His current position at Coalition focuses on reaching brokers and business owners in Western Canada to help them solve cyber risk through Coalition's unique structure of providing a best-in-class cyber insurance product with active cyber risk management tools. And last but certainly not least, Carson Turner is a passionate young commercial insurance broker with AWIN Insurance Solutions Group. He attended University of Lethbridge studying neuroscience and has used his ability to learn and dissect new information to rapidly propel his career forward in the insurance industry. So without further ado, over to you, Carson.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that introduction there. Just want to thank everybody for joining today and everybody that's going to be seeing this kind of in the future as we are recording this lecture, or this webinar, I should say. So this is going to be a pretty candid discussion with Joel, with Kara, over the next about an hour, hour and a half. So I wanted to start off and talk from a high level about why we kind of got this set up and then go into some of the risks that are out there. So we wanted to have this to be able to get from a kind of underwriter or from the insurance company standpoint and views on what's happening in this market space, as well as the broker, and as well as a cybersecurity expert like Kara. So actually, Kara, why don't you start us off and talk a little bit about some of those risks that are out there? What are businesses facing, and what have we kind of seen over the past couple of years?
Well, I think we've all been reading the headlines screaming, ransomware attack, ransomware attack, ransomware attack. And unfortunately, the severity of these attacks are increasing. The amounts of money that are being demanded is increasing, and it's hitting businesses of all sizes. So it's not just government organizations, it's small and medium-sized organizations as well. And we're seeing a lot more supply chain attacks. And it's really impacting organizations at all sizes. So from the mom and pop shop, 1 to 10 employees, to 50 employees, to 100 employees, to thousands of employees. And we're seeing now that it's no longer just criminal gangs, but it's nation state sponsored attacks. And it's not getting better, it's getting worse. So it's more important than ever before to invest in proper cyber hygiene and have a good cyber posture within your organization.
Just to add to that a little bit, Kara, from the insurer side, right, cyber risk, it's set to become the defining risk of our generation. We've never been more dependent on technology than we are today, and we're only going to have to become more reliant on that technology to stay connected to our peers, to our vendors, and to our customers. And as you mentioned earlier, right, most companies rely on working computer and internet access. So as these supply chain attacks become more prevalent, it's affecting not only hundreds but thousands of companies at the same time, all the way down the line, as we've seen through Kaseya and SolarWinds and Microsoft Exchange. And it's putting these small businesses who previously thought they weren't in the crosshairs of being targeted by hackers. They're now seeing that we're starting to see those claims come through. And strictly from a numbers standpoint, at Coalition, we've seen increases of business email compromise increase to 51% since 2020, as email is the dominant attack surface for a lot of small and medium enterprise businesses, along with an increase in fund transfer fraud of 28%. We've seen only a small uptick in actual ransomware incidents, but a rise in the severity of the ransoms that are being requested. In the first half of 2021, the average ransom demanded of customers of Coalition was 1.2 million, which is up 170% over the previous year. And really, just as the business impact increases, the leverage to demand those higher ransoms also increases from the threat actor side. And just from strictly a small, medium business standpoint, that particular frequency for companies with less than 250 employees has increased up to 57%.
And just to even add on to that, I think there's a lot of business owners out there that don't understand that regardless of the size that they are at risk for this. And as Joel mentioned there, it's no longer an emerging risk. It's no longer an emerging area. This is something that we see across lots of different sectors. Again, not just kind of government organizations that tend to be a little bit lackluster on their cybersecurity posture. We're seeing it go into other professions, other professional or other industries, I should say, as well. And one thing that I think is so fascinating about that is, it starts from these smaller pieces, these social engineering pieces that are able to get into businesses that, they might say, well, our data is not that valuable. Well, the way that things have changed over the years, and I'm sure you guys can speak on this as well, is it's no longer just about privacy or data breaches. That's a part of it, but things are moving, as you mentioned, away from even just malware to ransomware. They're getting in, and we talk about, and we will continue to talk about, the importance of training on employees to be able to understand and recognize when you have phishing emails, these different pieces, because it all starts with, most attacks and stuff like that come from human error and error in kind of overall kind of network posture and vulnerabilities that way. But I think it's a great kind of area for us to start this conversation of what is out there, and to hear, a 50% increase in ransomware attacks and the cost that has on a business can be detrimental, right? That's where the insurance piece comes in. We are not a maintenance option. We are not the first line of defense. You have somebody like Kara who's coming in to do these, to look at your business, to work with you, to make sure that you're setting yourself up in a way that you have the posture to prevent the pieces that we know that are vulnerabilities. We know that, it's the best, it's going to the doctor and them saying, okay, do your regular exercise. These are the things that we know that help. And it gives us a really good posture to be able to, when you come to the broker, or when we go and we take your risk to these insurance companies, that we're able to, get you coverage, but we're able to work with your business to know that you are risk adverse, that you are trying to protect yourselves from these high risk pieces. So I think it's great that way to be having this conversation. I did want to ask kind of both of you, how have we seen these cyber risks change with COVID? A lot of people working from home and kind of that whole, hybrid models for some businesses. How has that affected things in the past couple of years? If you can kind of speak to that.
Sure. We've seen everybody work from home. So now they're using their own devices. Maybe they're using VPNs, they're connecting in differently. Their devices may not be secure as they are in the office. We've seen instances of, children playing on dad and mom's computers and, getting in and deleting things they shouldn't be deleting. And, there's just a lot of distractions and a lot of things that used to be not even thought about. And so this endpoint detection, we call it endpoint detection, has become more and more prevalent and important. And something that we're seeing in the industrial space that's even more concerning is the, sorry, I have a call coming in on my other line. So, so I'll just ignore that. But the sensors. So sensors, we have trillions of sensors and we don't know what the security level in those sensors are. So they could have backdoor malware installed in those sensors, or they're not secure. So now we're looking at all the sensors that are out there. So OT is just as important as IT. So we're seeing that those types of sensors are being hacked. Communication devices are being surveilled, and bad guys are getting in through that type of communication where we never really gave it much thought before. This is a new way in, and they're using artificial intelligence in ways that we haven't considered before either. So they're using artificial intelligence, natural language processing to mimic CEOs or to mimic other people in the company, to give direction either by voice or by writing, by emails, and giving direction to transfer funds or to buy gift cards or any of these types of attacks. This is more, I think, more prevalent now than, and these kind of scams are more prevalent now than it was a year ago or even 2 years ago. And people are more susceptible now because they are at home and they don't have people to ask. And, they think they're clicking on a safe link and it's not, and then they're ashamed and they don't say, they don't talk to a trusted friend. And so people are being duped and suckered in ways that we haven't seen before either.
Absolutely. And actually that leads into another point there. And I want to kind of pause everything for a moment and to say, when we talk about hackers, this is not a traditional, kind of disgruntled teen in mom's basement that's going after, the upset or the business that they upset them. These are powerful organizations, and they're not just going after businesses from I'm going to directly attack X business. They're sending out these they can be malicious links. They can do that, and they can do that in masses. Right? They're opening up these opportunities where it is not your business is targeted because you do X, Y, and Z. They're going to look for vulnerabilities that are out there that are going to be that they can capitalize on to make profit from. So when we talk about those funds transfer fraud, it's how fast can the bad actor get from intrusion to payment? The longer that time period, the more of an investment it is on their end. So, and Joel, I'll have you talk about this in a little bit here, but on that funds transfer fraud piece, if you have your CEO or what you think is your CEO emailing you to say, hey, can we have X, Y, and Z account? Can we have X number of dollars moved over into this bank account? We're just moving some stuff around. And you're not verifying that. You're not looking at to see, even something as simple as mousing over the email and you go, whoa, like that is not that person's email, but it will show up with their name. That's where the employees, and this can happen where there's a little bit of that even guilt that comes with it, right? There's the opportunity that opens for those actors to get in there, impersonate somebody, have funds move over, and unfortunately happens a lot more. But Joel, I wanted to ask you specifically about kind of funds transfer fraud. Has that been an area that we've also seen kind of increasing over the past couple of years in severity, or can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, we're up in the neighborhood of 30% in fund transfer fraud cases that we've seen year over year compared to 2020. And both of you really touched on an important piece of how sophisticated these threat actors are getting in their attacks against businesses where you'll receive an email from someone. It will not look at all like a spoofed email. It is coming from the correct spot, from your eyes, right? And seeing that there could be somebody in the background surveilling, they know that a fund transfer is supposed to take place. They know which vendor it's supposed to go to. And it's really easy, right, for them to, for threat actors to kind of time that and perpetrate an inadvertent fund transfer somewhere. Something that we're doing at Coalition and we're getting much better at is being able to recover those funds even after they've been dispersed. So upwards of 80% of the fund transfer fraud cases that we see, we are able to recover those funds only by getting better at working more closely with banks and the RCMP, the FBI if necessary, to freeze those funds while they're in transit and before those funds are siphoned off into an untraceable account somewhere.
Absolutely, and maybe this is a good piece to hop in here as well, or we can get to kind of questions throughout, or we can kind of pause partway through. But I'll just throw this one up there. So all those questionnaires on Facebook, can this be harmful to your system? Was one of the questions that was asked kind of in the question and answer period or area. Kara, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of even just like this best practices while you're out there, you know, on the internet, and what you can do to protect yourself, and from a high level as an individual, but also from a business perspective, and kind of answer that if you could. Sorry, I think you're muted.
From a personal perspective, you know, when you're answering those questionnaires on Facebook, they're asking you for your personal information. And if you don't know the source and where that data is going, you're basically giving up your personal information, and you're giving permission for those people with those questionnaires to use your personal data in any way they want to. So if you're disclosing things like your social insurance number or your address or your holidays or your birthday, you know, that's all personal identifiable information. That's your information, that's your data. And so you really need to protect that, because you don't know what they're doing with it. You don't know if they're sending it somewhere, if they're reselling it, if you're being stalked, if you're being watched. But a lot of the bad guys will look for you on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and they'll try and get as much information as they can. They're doing reconnaissance on you. And the higher position you are, the more likely they are to be looking at your social media. And, you know, and if you're using company computer equipment and you're, you know, surfing on the web, then, you know, you're exposing your company to potential vulnerabilities. So you need to think about what links you're clicking, what games you're playing. You know, the Candy Crush game on Facebook might not be so sweet and innocent. You know, these are ways that that they're getting in. This is the way the bad guys are getting in. You go to a malicious website, they install their cookies, they get into your system. And there's a lot of very, very advanced malware out there that is not leaving traces behind. So they go in and they can sit in your system for months and you don't even know that they're there, right? And then they go back out and they go into the internet and they get more code and they infect more, they move laterally throughout, and before you know it, you've got a ransomware attack. And just backing up your systems isn't enough. Just the backup, you could have been infected for 4 months. So you've lost 4 months worth of company data. And you think, oh, well, I just filled out this little innocent looking survey. Well, it might not be so innocent. So you need to really come at this with a zero trust mentality. You don't trust anything, and you protect your personal data the same way you would with your passport or your driver's license or anything else.
And I think that ties right into, sorry, Joel, I was just going to mention, Crystal kind of posted a thing about a fake fundraiser, right? That when you get that kind of information on somebody, date of births are a huge one. If there's a random piece to put in your date of birth, don't put in your correct date of birth. that's again, especially if it's forcing you to for different things, you want to make sure that, yeah, as Kara said there, you're protecting that, because over time somebody can get a whole lot of information on you, and to be able to post up, there's fake profiles that people will pop up impersonating someone. That is something we've all seen. The Facebook link from somebody that is a faraway acquaintance. It's, oh, hey, is this you in this video? All of that information, they were being had been gotten from other areas, and it just kind of makes it a little bit of a scary piece. But I just wanted to tie that into what Crystal was saying, because I think that perfectly ties into what we're talking about here. And Joel, I don't know if you have anything to add there. There's just a couple questions I'll look at here.
No, I was just going to touch on what Kara said, to loop this back to network security for businesses, right? And we really do need to be taking a zero trust mentality. Previously in the past, the methodology was protect the perimeter and trust everything that's inside. Whereas now, the issue with signal detection devices or technology, if there's a novel signal, you're not going to be able to pick that up, right? It's malware that's constantly evolving and changing itself within your system. So it's not necessarily always going to be picked up. So having an appropriate, endpoint detection response company or partner in place is extremely important.
Let's just look at some of the questions here as we kind of pause there. When your network is infiltrated and you have received a ransom demand, what should your first series of actions be as a Canadian business? Ooh, excellent question. I guess we can start from a policyholder standpoint with a company such as Coalition here. Joel, do you want to kind of speak to that, and we can kind of break that back, and we'll have Kara talk as well?
Sure, absolutely. So Coalition prides itself in being the company that partners with you to provide services before, during, and after a breach. So we want to be that proverbial 911 for you if you're a policyholder of ours. Reason being is that cyber risks as opposed to physical risks, where if your house is on fire, you don't have to put out that fire, right? All you have to do is get out of the house with the kids and the pets and call 911. Those services are in place for you. If you were to call, and we do obviously recommend notifying law enforcement if you do have a ransomware attack, but they're not going to know how to stop that right away. So we want to be that proverbial 911 to be able to respond with Coalition's in-house incident response team, combined with the way that we underwrite companies. And I can touch on this a little bit later, but basically we already have a view of what your attack surface looks like from the outside. So we know which devices are connected to the internet, which ones are open, which ones are not, or access behind a firewall or an out-of-date firewall, right? So it enables us to respond efficiently and quickly to be able to determine what that attack vector is, to determine the extent of the breach, to boot out an intruder if somebody's already in there while preventing future access. And then we would move on to system remediation.
I really appreciate that kind of breakdown there. And I guess to give everybody kind of a high level of what that would look like. So you would have somebody like Kara that would go in and do those initial audits of your system to see where you have points of vulnerability in your system. This is way prior to anything on the back end policyholder side. And when she's going in there, she's going to be working with you to say, and you can speak to this probably a lot better on what that looks like. That's your first line of defense. Then you have where you're sitting down with me, the broker, we're going into what your risk profile is from there, what amount of coverage do you require that's going to effectively be able to minimize that financial loss for you, and kind of everything that comes in part with that. And then we have the back end, in the event, where's your 911, as Joel just explained there, what that looked like. But why don't we talk a little bit about where you kind of come in there, Karen, the first step, and what that would actually look like for a business owner. What is having somebody like yourself come in and work with them? What does that look like?
Okay, sure. And, we do third-party security audits. So we come in and we work with your team. We work with businesses, business owners, and their security team. So whether they might have a managed IT service provider, they might have in-house security, or they might not have any security. So we provide security as a service. So we'll take an initial look at the business about what security measures they have in place. And then we got to take a list of inventory. What assets do they have? What is the criticality? What is the impact if there is a breach? What is the potential impact if there is a breach? And we kind of go from there to work with the senior executive, and we go through a checklist of different items to get a very clear understanding of what needs to be protected and how severe the potential breach could be. And then we build out an incident response plan. So exactly what, to the point of the question, it's like, what do we do if we get ransomware? And we run through drills, just like a fire drill, right? So you have a fire drill, we have a cybersecurity drill. We do cybersecurity awareness training. So what happens if you click that suspicious link? What do you do? And so we empower employees through education and training on what to do in the event that it happens. First of all, how do you prevent it? And then if you make a mistake, what do you do after the fact? And then who needs to be notified, right? If you're a publicly traded company, you've got rules and regulations, you've got laws, right? And it's depending on the size of the breach, you need to let certain people know. So your insurance company, 911, and you need to go through the steps in your incident response plan. So do I need to call my boss? Do I need to call my boss's boss? Does our PR team need to know? Like, what happens if this hits the press? What's the communications plan? And so all of these things need to be determined in advance. And then we run fire drills. So that if it does happen, you already know what to do in the event, and you're well rehearsed and well practiced. And hopefully, like a fire drill, you never need to do it for real. And we never advocate for paying ransom. Some companies do because they deem it less expensive to pay the ransom than they do to go through insurance, but that is not the way to go. I would highly discourage anyone to pay ransom. If you do pay ransom, then you go on a list of next hits. So the bad guys know you paid the ransom, they're going to hit you again, and you might not get the key to open up your files again. So you always go to your insurance company first, and then you go through the various steps. So notifying the proper authorities, so the police, the RCMP, the FBI, you notify your communications team, you notify your management team, and then you do your risk mitigation. So we work with companies to go through all of that so that we can complement their existing team and we de-risk the vulnerabilities that we find. It also helps with getting proper coverage and reducing your premiums.
Yeah, and Joel, do you want to talk maybe a little bit about, or we can go into it a little bit later, but the ransomware payouts and what that looks like, or do we want to go into that a little bit later?
Sure. So we actually just had an update on this morning from our claims team. So paying a ransom is never the first line of defense for us. We have a very thorough kind of 10 to 12 questionnaire that we walk through insureds very closely to see, if there's any way we can resolve this situation without paying a ransom. Reason being is, one, ransoms are expensive, right? So that's why we highly encourage everybody to have segregated backups, either on a separate hard disk drive, separate network, or on the cloud, with regular occurrence and regular compatibility checks to make sure that just because you have backups doesn't mean you can always fully restore your system from those backups. So it's important to check their compatibility. Secondly, it's becoming an increasing trend where data exfiltration is going to happen regardless if a ransom is paid or not. If you're paying to keep your data secret or to stay off a list, right, that's just one list that's published. That doesn't necessarily mean that your data has already been exfiltrated elsewhere, which is what we often see sometimes. So it really is a balance between evaluating all those factors to determine, right, what's the quickest way to get access back to the system, what type of information was taken, is it probable that this data has already been exfiltrated, and how do we get back online as quickly as possible.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And you're absolutely right there. And I think that goes right into the incident response plan that Carol was talking about. It is all about, are you ready for, in the event of not an if, but a when, right? Unfortunately, that is the reality of the situation. Businesses will be hit. And if you're in the best position to know who to notify, what to do, you're in the best position for yourself as maybe as an executive, as an employee. You know what your steps are. It's not something that, again, is progressed over days or weeks, where a lot more data, a lot more things can be impacted. You're getting in there, you know what to do, you know how to, hit the red alarm button and get things to a place where they can determine if they need to pay a ransom, if that's even something that it was caught early enough that maybe we can minimize what that looks like. Now, just in contrast, compare that if you don't have, let's say you just came to me, you said, okay, you know what, maybe cyber is something kind of going on, let's get a policy in place. And if you're not paying attention to what to do in those incidents, your team, your employees are not paying attention to what they need to do in those incidents, it can make a small claim become a huge, massive claim that can drastically shut down operations. It can change, it can get out of hand very, very quickly, I guess, is the end point of that. So it's so important to have that education on the employee side, as well as the incident response plan. When I present that to an underwriter, and I can say, you know what, look at this risk. They are being as risk adverse as they can. They have this incident response plan in place. They've done, say, a third-party audit. When Coalition does their kind of outside public scan, which we can maybe talk about a little bit later, to say, okay, you know, we've had other people look at this. This isn't the first time that they're looking at their cybersecurity at all. They already have a good posture, and it is now ensuring that posture as again, a second line of defense, the last line of defense, rather than it trying to be the first line of defense.
I'll happily second that, Carson. The scan that we use is a tool that we use in our underwriting process, not the only tool. We highly recommend having things like an incident response plan in place, right? Having multi-factor authentication enabled for endpoints or privileged users, right? All of this contributes to your end cyber posture. Is really what we're looking at.
Definitely. And if there wasn't anything else on there, maybe we can fire off some questions here. You guys ready?
Yeah.
So we kind of went through the kind of what should you do as in the event of kind of your first steps, your 911 call. So we kind of went through that one. It seems like every website is now asking permission to install cookies. Are you saying that we should decline to allow these? Is this backdoor tracked for a hacker? Well, for any of your cookies or anything like that, just imagine that pretty much anything that you do online, there's going to be, back-end trails of that. There's a little bit of like a footprint that kind of, this is where so-and-so was on this site for this long, this is what they clicked on. And from a micro view, you might say, well, it doesn't really matter. But in the grand scheme of things, they can get a very good look at what your patterns are as an individual. And again, it makes those if that data gets released to the wrong person, it's very easy to impersonate some of those things. So is it something that you should maybe not have cookies? I mean, maybe Carrie, you can speak to this a little bit better than I can. I always am very cautious on what I have that is that I'm accepting or allowing, especially if you're going to a web page you've never been there before and it's just popping up on your phone. You're yes, 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 just get it out of the way. Yeah, maybe don't do that. But maybe you can speak to a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think you got to, and you're absolutely right about the website that you're visiting, right? So you've got to be a little bit more cognizant about where you're going and why you're going. And everybody has to have a cookie policy now, and they pop it up, and it does pop up, and you just do that automatically. Oh, yes, 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 yes. And you don't realize actually that you're giving them permission to capture your data and do with it what they want. So there's settings within there that you can actually click off. And it can be, is it cookies just to optimize performance? Are they going to be targeting ads based on your preferences? Like, do you really want that? So you don't click that? Or, are you clicking off to resell your data? Because of the new privacy laws, and they're becoming more and more strict, which is great. You need to understand where your data is going and who's buying it and who's using it and what they're using it for. If you don't mind getting spammed with targeted ads, then click them all. I just use them for functionality, or I try not to have any cookies, and then I'm always clearing them because that's how they're getting in. They're getting in at the browser level. That's one of the ways that they get in. Macros is another way. So things that are seemingly harmless, and what was harmless in the past is not anymore. And if there's a way in, they're going to find it. They're clever. These people are very, very intelligent. That's what they do for a living. They get paid a lot of money to trick you into believing that you're safe. So, don't go visit dubious websites. Take a look at the URLs. Don't click on links. Copy and paste the link and put it into a browser and go through the browser. Start thinking a little bit more cyber aware, like you don't walk down a dark alley at midnight in downtown anywhere. So, you don't randomly click yes, okay to all the cookies and go to whatever website and trust that you'll be safe and trust that, Apple will keep me safe or Microsoft will keep me safe, because they won't. It's, they're being hacked all the time. They're huge targets. So blindly trusting and clicking yes to everything, you do it at your own folly.
And just on the flip side of that, even with regards to hosting your own website, as almost every company does, something we see that comes up pretty often. Lots of people do use cookies to track user activity and user experience on their own websites, which is fine, to see how far people go down the user funnel, to see how they can, improve the flow or anything like that. But it's important to have a max age or expiring attribute to your cookies that you are putting out into the world, which is basically open the door for somebody to communicate back with your system. So that's important, and that's something that Kara's team would help you with.
Great points there. So let's go on to the next question here. And I think this is an excellent one. It's a little bit more in that nitty gritty. We love to get into that. So what is being recommended for slow burn / ghosts in the machine attacks where bad actors got access but have not acted? So they've infiltrated, they're sitting there, they are kind of collecting data on kind of where those funds are going, who's doing what, who's initiating what transactions. In that stage, so something's in, but we're kind of there. What does that look like?
Well, how are you finding it? First of all, I kind of wonder how you know that there's somebody in there. So what kind of tools are you using? Is this your security team? What kind of relationship do you have? So is it an internal discovery from your own internal team, or is this a discovery from the managed service provider, or is it from your security team? How do you know that somebody is in there and doing recon? There's various tools that we use, various solutions that we use in order to detect anomalous behavior and detect to see if people are there. And a lot of these tools now will detect and then they will quarantine it. They'll take it right out of your system, or they'll shut it right down. So, it would depend on the situation. It would depend on how it was being detected and what was being monitored. And sometimes you monitor the monitoree. So you watch what they're doing, And, when I used to work in oil and gas, I was working down the hallway from corporate security. And they knew that the nation state actors were watching them. And so they had a team of watchers watching them. They said, yeah, we know they're in there, and they're just sitting there, and they've been there for 6 months, and we're watching them, and we're just seeing what they're doing. They haven't stolen any data, but we want to know what they're after. And so they had a team, a corporate security team, a cyber team watching them, watch them. And that was a corporate decision on how they wanted to deal with that particular situation. They were just waiting for them to make a move. And then they would act accordingly. So it really depends on the situation, depends on the business, and it depends on how you're detecting it. But a lot of tools are there. They can detect and remove right away.
Absolutely. Oh, I was just going to say real quick, Joel, and ideally we want to catch them before they're getting in. I mean, that's the best case scenario, but yeah, it would be tough to know there's somebody in there. We don't know who, we don't know what they're doing. Yeah, you would probably catch it when something happens as an endpoint of that, or hopefully prior to. That was the only piece I was going to add to that. Go ahead, Joel.
And just to highlight one of the, as I shamelessly plug my own company, one of the additional services that we offer is third-party monitoring. So we are scanning the whole of the public internet up to 200 times a month. That's 4 billion unique IPv4 addresses and 8 billion devices that are connected to the internet. And what we're doing is monitoring for signal data that potentially harmfully impacts our policyholders. And I was given an example from our incident response team where they were receiving signal data from known threat actor infrastructure from one of our policyholders that we immediately contacted along with the broker to keep them in the loop and let them know what was going on, to say, hey, listen, we've received a signal, you have a malware variant, we know that's likely in your system, we need to dig into this further. It found out it was very close to the endpoint to threat actors flipping the switch on a ransomware attack. So we immediately air-gapped the system to rebuild it. And later on, as our threat intelligence team was monitoring the dark web and some of the chat rooms, they were able to see the name of our policyholder that came up in the ransomware that was being negotiated. And what they landed on was $5.5 million. They were about to flip the switch, launch a ransomware attack, and that's what was going to be requested of your organization. So, I mean, there's really anywhere that these things can come from, but it's important to have an incident response plan in place with your third-party provider like Kara, and have those active monitoring services in place like Coalition.
And I believe also Amylite it does a similar but a different kind of monitoring as well. I mean, the more eyes that you have on it, the better, in my opinion, across the board. Yeah, I just wanted to throw that little piece in there.
Thanks, Kirsten.
And so let's look at some other questions here, because there are quite a few, and I just want to thank everybody in the chat for being as engaged as you are, asking these questions. We have, the knowledge base between, especially these two, is absolutely incredible, and we're so thankful to be able to ask these questions and kind of get into it. So let's go into what type of risks related to cybersecurity do you advise to be listed on your enterprise risk register?
Sorry, can you repeat that one more time, Carson?
Yeah, what type of risks related to cybersecurity do you advise to be listed in your enterprise risk register? I'm guessing that's pretty much saying that to let your enterprise or your overall business, if you're an individual, if you're an employee, if something happens, what should you be kind of passing upwards to say something happened? I'm guessing that's kind of what it's saying. Maybe I'm misinterpreting that. Does that sound about right? I would, well, I guess I can start this off maybe. So I think that from an employee standpoint, if you see something, if you see an email coming through that doesn't look quite right, or if it's something where you know that that person from payments, from accounting, probably wouldn't it just seems like something odd, or if it's something from, it could even be your CEO or anything like that, especially if it's kind of a, hey, hush, hush, maybe it's a surprise for somebody, or hey, just in this backend, we need to move this over. Call that person, verify with them before doing anything. That's the very first piece. And if they say, no, I didn't send you that email at all, what are you talking about? Now you really want to kind of alert up. So it's kind of monitoring or self-monitoring, I would say, at that point. Maybe you guys can add in some stuff there, but that's what I would say from a employee standpoint, which they would get through training and stuff as well.
I think you're gonna have to determine a number of risks, right? So you need to identify what data that you want to keep secure. So, you know, because they're looking for different things. It's not just funds, right? They're looking for corporate information. So you might have an employee inside that's looking for database information or customer information, or maybe employee information, whether it be benefits or it could be financial. So there's a number and severity of risks associated. So you've got to look at it. You know, we've primarily been talking about external threat, but there's a lot of internal threat as well. So disgruntled employees will steal data, and they could sell it on the dark web as well. So we see insider threat and outsider threat. So you've got to kind of break those down in terms of your risk register. So you need to do an internal scan and an external scan. And so that's an identification of what your assets are. And again, the criticality of a breach or theft, right? So how important is it? And then what is your, what's your exposure? So if you're in healthcare, for example, and you breach patient records, I mean, that's a big deal, right? It's a lot more severe than, if you've just got a random database of information that you haven't touched in 20 years that probably should just be gone, right? So you've got to identify that, and then and be aware that those risks are there. And what is the cost to replace that data? What is the cost to your reputation? Because now they know that you're not secure, and your customers know, and the world knows that you don't practice good cyber hygiene. So those are all different types of risks, and you need to rank them rank them as impact. So what's the impact on your business, both financially and reputationally? And, a lot of small businesses that have been hacked or have been breached, they go under. I think I saw a stat that said 60% of small businesses that have had a breach do not survive. That's a big number. So you could actually be bankrupt.
Well, I think to add on to that, I think that in itself is huge, is also the reputational harm, right? When I go to present a different or go to a different company, a vendor, whatever that I'm working with, and they understand that we have this huge breach, that can turn people off going and working with that company. There's also the flip side of that, where as a company, you need to be very aware of your vendors, of your different pieces that are attached to you, and what information they have on you, and looking at their posture as well, making sure that everybody is kind of up to code. I think is a big piece that I just wanted to throw in there.
And along with that comprehensive plan that Kara outlined, I think it's really important to marry that and align that with your employee cybersecurity awareness training. That was the first question that was asked when I joined Coalition. And the first thing you did on the first day was cybersecurity awareness training. And the question is, what's our most valuable piece of information, right? And for Coalition, it was our policyholder list. Everybody, the entire list of the 55,000 plus customers that we insure, that information around our policyholders, what limits they have, what coverage they have, that's our most important information that we need to keep secure. So everything we do in our day-to-day jobs is around, you always have that in the back of your mind. Am I keeping this information secure?
Absolutely. Maybe some real quick, what are some myths about organizational security?
Oh, you know what I get? Oh, my IT guy has that. We don't need security. My IT guy has that. And my response to that is maybe not. It depends on the training and level that the IT person has. So a lot of times they have not, or we've found a lot of times they're not security professionals, they're IT professionals. And now we're seeing a whole evolution of a new vertical within corporations that's security focused. So now we see Chief Information Security Officer or Chief Security Officer, and that is a whole separate domain and a whole separate vertical, and IT is broken out of that. So there's a Chief Information Officer or a Chief Technology Officer, and that's different than a Chief Security Officer. And underneath the Chief Security Officer comes all of the analysts, and they are specifically trained in cybersecurity. That's all they do is cybersecurity all day, every day, and they're experts in the industry. They're not jack of all trades, putting on the security hat because they can sell you more things, right? I think that's a number one myth. And then the second myth that I hear all the time is we don't need security, we got insurance. And they'll just pay for it. And and so I've got Kirsten and Joel here that can speak to that mentality as a first line of defense, and like, yeah, we don't have to worry about it, we have insurance. So, I want them to tell you and share with you what their perspective is on that myth.
Absolutely. And from the client facing side, when I'm sitting down with clients and we're talking about not just their cyber posture, but in the event of something, and we talk about, okay, is a policy on a cyber policy something that you're looking for? Are we looking to add coverage to it? What do we need to do to this to make sure it's up to date? And when they say, oh, well, I'm a smaller business or I'm a medium-sized business, that's not going to happen to me. That's a difficult place to be in as a broker, and understanding, and this is kind of a niche in terms of, or was a niche, I'm going to say, on the cyber insurance side, and now it's exploding. And to have a broker that can sit down and say, okay, well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the risks. In the event of this, what does that do to your business? And it's not just a quick, are you interested in cyber insurance? No. Okay, sounds good. On to the next. It really needs to be a conversation looking at the risk profile, and you need to have a broker that understands this stuff. And they don't need to be an expert, but they need to understand where that line is drawn between, this is not your first line of defense. What other things are you doing ahead of time? And is this a client that is going to be statured in the future for a high risk, a big payout? Or are they somebody that is trying to be risk adverse, but maybe just doesn't have the tools at this moment for it? And so then we can connect them to those resources to be able to be a little bit more risk adverse, because we don't want to be working with clients that just don't believe that this is a thing that happens. And despite everything that's coming at them, if they don't put in that time and effort, it's very difficult. But then we can come from an education standpoint. Look at these risks. What would happen in the event of your system going down for 48, 60, 72 hours? If it goes down for 72 hours, what does that do to your business? What does that mean if you can't get X files back? What does that mean to your business? What would be the financial loss of that? How would you recover from that? Okay, you don't have backups. Okay, maybe that's an area to start with. And it puts a lot of, I'm going to say pressure, but maybe is a different word, responsibility on the broker to really know this stuff. If the client is not coming from these other areas where they've approached Kara to be able to say, hey, we want to look at these things. Can you help us? And now coming to me to say, hey, look at all these things that we've done. We go, excellent. Now we can look at finding you some great coverage, work with our underwriters and make the most of this and make this policy something that is going to be what's really going to respond in a way that makes the most sense for everybody involved. You have the training for your employees, and it just makes that whole process so much easier. And Joel could probably speak to the underwriting. When you see a risk that's coming in like that, in comparison to hey, it's, this medium-sized enterprise, they do about this in revenue, they're moving a bunch of stuff digitally, but they don't really have any backups. Their IT team, they're not really interested in kind of paying attention to this. They just want kind of a quick quote. that risk in comparison to those forward-thinking, risk-adverse clients, huge difference. And maybe you can speak to that a little bit, Joel, just from an underwriting side.
No, absolutely. And our mission, all three of our missions, is to help solve cyber risk, and insurance is only one part of that. It is very much the last part of that. Right, when we're underwriting an account, we're looking at it. Yes, we're looking at your specific technology and what's exposed to the internet, but very much those internal controls, right? That Amolite can help you develop. So it's very much it's if you think of a graph in terms of, there is a point where you'll reach diminishing returns in the amount of money that you sink into cybersecurity, but you can greatly reduce that right at the very beginning. But at the very end, you're never going to get to absolutely zero in the terms of risk that you have for cyber, and that's where that last piece of insurance comes into play.
Absolutely. And I guess the other piece as well is, as the three of us know, these risks are evolving so much quicker than traditional risks, right? Your fire and your building code to say, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't have this super flammable piece that we're building with anymore, or maybe we shouldn't have poly B or kinetic C or whatever piping in a building. This isn't the best for because it causes water losses. We should move to something else. That happens over long periods of time in traditional kind of insurance. Whereas on the cyber piece, things are moving rapidly. By the quarter, things are changing. And so if you have a client that when you come back a year later and say, you're up for renewal, here's how things have changed. With all your other policies, okay, has the operations changed? No, okay, not too much. Have you changed buildings? It's a little bit more straightforward. Whereas on the cyber piece, I think it is so important to, as a broker, to know that I'm working with a client that is going to be looking forward and saying, okay, so what does that mean for next year, the year after? And we'll get into a little bit of kind of what people can expect from the cyber insurance world and premiums and kind of what that market looks like. We'll talk about that a little bit afterwards. But I do want to hit some more of these questions here.
Carson, I know in our previous conversation in our prep calls, you talked about the difference between having a separate cyber insurance policy and a rider. And could you answer that? Because I thought that was a great distinction that people don't normally know about.
Absolutely, be happy to. So I think on a lot of so a commercial general liability policy, so you can imagine your basic kind of policy as a business, and you'll have these other extensions for operations. Maybe you'll have a different piece with it. Now under here, you might have some crime extensions. You may have some different coverages under there. Now, a lot of the time, insurance companies will, especially kind of your main insurance companies, will throw on what's called a cyber add-on. Now, a cyber add-on might be in the $100 to $300 range on what could be maybe a $20,000 policy or something. Just a really small little piece. Now, that cyber coverage checks the box where people will think, if it's not explained to them, okay, my cyber is taken care of. Oh, I got it for $100. What do you mean you're going to quote me a decent premium on the side for this other policy? No, I got it for $100. I got a great deal. But the issue is when, and if you're a huge nerd like me and you go and you read the wordings of what that is covering, you realize that oh, wow, this is paying for, in the event that our whole system is hacked, sure, we'll give you up to $25,000 to replace your computers, your physical computer. And you go, okay, but that doesn't help me restore any data. That doesn't help me rebuild things. What happens in the event of ransomware? And they go, oh, that's hard. Well, that's excluded because we're not paying that out. That's so expensive. And so you really have to go through the wordings and realize that it's almost sometimes not worth the paper that it's written on. So that's why you go to a very specific standalone cyber policy. This is a risk that should not just be a little piece that's added on. It's a piece that you want to spend the time, the money to make sure that it is a quality product. So in the event of something, you're taken care of. That is across the board. Business owners want peace of mind. And they want to know that I don't need to be a cybersecurity expert, but I know that I've done the steps so that if something happens, me and my employees know what to do and that we will be taken care of. That is all business owners want. And when they can get that simplicity, That's straightforward. A, B, C, D. Here's who you call. Here's your 911. Here's what your posture looks like. Here's how things are changing. Carry on. It makes it so much easier because they have a million other things going on. So I think that's the biggest piece is between those add-ons and a full in-depth cyber policy is understanding the difference between what is covered and what is not covered. Even on a basic standalone cyber policy, you got to go through with your broker. Is this coverage applicable to my business operations? And if you're not going through to say, well, you do a ton of funds transfer, but we don't have that on here right off the bat, or this wasn't on, your policy because it's going to increase your premiums. Of course it is, because that's where the risk is for you, right? And so I think that's where it's so important to sit down with a broker that will go through this with you. And this is just cyber. You got your other insurance. This is a niche. You gotta know that you're talking to somebody that cares or that is a huge nerd like myself. But hopefully that answers.
Trusted advisor, right? Like, that's what we are. We're trusted advisors and we're experts in our space. And you want to talk to the experts. You don't want to second guess, and you want something that's customized to your business. So it's not a one size fits all. Every industry has different risks. Every company has different risks. And so, you can't just paint it all with one kind of policy or one kind of rider, one kind of extension. And that dialogue up front, that preventative dialogue is so critical and so important. And then you can sleep at night. You've done your homework, you've done your due diligence. You're supposed to be focused on your core business, on what your business is. You're not supposed to be cybersecurity experts. You're not supposed to be insurance experts. That's what we're for. You're supposed to be focused on your own business. You just know that you need to have this and hire trusted advisors, just like you would a lawyer, just like you would an accountant, just like you would any other domain specialist.
So Kara, might I ask, and this came up in our previous conversations as well, how does a business owner know in their business life cycle when is a good time to engage with an Amolite or an AWIN? Like, when should they start thinking about this?
Now. They should start. It should be now. If they've got a computer, if they've got a business, it should be now. It's security by design, and it's part of operating any business. Just like you have to do your accounting, you need to have security in your business.
And I guess to add on to that from the broker side, to come to a broker to say, you know what, I am starting to pay attention to some of these risks that are out there. I want to have the conversation. That's a great starting point as well. If it's coming to me and to say, excellent, a great starting point even before this, let's reach out to Kara. Let's have this team we are the experts in this space. Let's help you. Let's inform you. Let's teach you. Let's work with you and your employees. But I think you're absolutely right. As soon as you are in business, as soon as you are doing anything on that front, you have a network, you're building that out. You want to make sure it's protected. And these payouts of $500,000 up to $1 million ransomware attacks, that's not, that can absolutely destroy a business, right? And you've worked so hard for this to be able to engage at an earlier standpoint, and we can help talk about what that looks like moving forward, and building out those policies, building out those incident response plans. And it does take a little bit of upfront work, but I can assure you it is very worth it.
And I might just echo part of that by saying cyber risk is so much less static than a normal property or casualty risk. It's something that's ongoing at all times. So I would encourage you to partner with a third-party security audit firm like Amolite, a broker like AWIN, or an insurer partner like Coalition that are providing those active insurance or risk management pieces for you throughout your business life cycle.
Absolutely. Just real quick, so what's the difference between cyber insurance compared to other kinds of commercial insurance? I think we hit that pretty much on the head, but it is such a different risk profile than other things that we look at. You just really want to make sure that you are in front of the right person there.
And not to get into the too nitty gritty, but again, with the standalone insurance policy, ensure you're getting third-party costs, so network and information security liability. Make sure you have first-party coverage to respond in the event if something happens internally, and make sure you have coverage for things like cybercrime related to funds transfer fraud, and make sure that your limit is adequate enough to respond if something does happen, and that it includes those breach response costs.
Absolutely, and you're right. When we sit down with those clients and we go through what exactly is needed to what limits, and go through all of that, but you're absolutely right on that one. Just looking for other questions here. Is there a noticeable drop in malicious activity if Cloudflare is used for a website? I'm actually not too familiar with Cloudflare, so
yeah, that's vendor specific. Cloudflare it's a great product, and I don't know of any statistics I can provide, but I would suspect there is not a drop in malicious activity because the bad actors are the bad actors. In case like there's hundreds of thousands of attempted attacks. I would say Cloudflare is a good product to help secure your organization and help secure your website and your assets. But I don't know specifics. Like I can't say that for your specific website, Cloudflare prevented X amount of attacks. What I do know is that they're an excellent Canadian product, and definitely worth looking into. And I that's about all I know about Cloudflare in particular.
And they actually are a partner company of Coalition as well, where we recommend using them for securing your websites and your APIs and using them for endpoint detection response. So they're a very reputable company that we encourage using.
Excellent. Can you tell me what cyber awareness training is and who in your business should attend? Great question.
Yeah, everyone should attend cyber awareness training, and it should be done frequently. So there's all kinds of cyber awareness training in the marketplace. We provide cybersecurity awareness training, everything from fake phishing emails to going through the fire drills, incident response planning, but every single person in the organization should be cyber aware.
100%. It doesn't matter if they're touching funds or if they're not. It's across the board. So it looks like we answered all of our questions there. If there are any others, please post them up. Otherwise, I wanted to kind of bring it back, unless there wasn't anything else that you guys really wanted to hit on and talk about. So what does that look like for a business? Again, from just a high level kind of next steps. So again, to be able to engage myself, Kara, as kind of that first piece of, okay, what should we do in this space? What should things look like as we build that out? Again, I think it's so important to just hammer on the point that insurance is not your maintenance. It is your last line of defense. We want to do everything in our ability to protect you before that point of having to use the insurance. It is a safety net rather than a first line of defense again. So I think that's just such a key point to hammer on. Because we want to make sure that you're not putting in those claims unless you absolutely have to, because it will make a difference. And as this, and maybe I'll talk marketplace here a little bit, and Joel, you can add on to this, with COVID and just remote work, but the amount of claims that have been paid out over the course of the last even 2 years has gone up such a high amount. And I think it was like in 2020, I think it was a stat of it's like 1,100% or something. It went up. Something like that. But it was the amount of these claims that are causing premiums to go up, because across the board, if you're having these massive hits, and when we talk about Microsoft Exchange or Amazon Web Services or any of these cloud hosts being hit, you can think of it almost as if it was a catastrophic event in, let's say, a Calgary. If there's a huge hailstorm that comes through, it hits all these different insurance companies, everybody's got to pay out, everybody's rates are going up. Well, on the cyber side, it's the exact same thing. When you have a massive cloud player, if they're impacted, all those businesses that are using them are now at the potential of being impacted. And so you see these increase in premiums, and that's going to be something that we see. But it's also, as we know, a risk that is becoming more and more predominant. And when people say, you know what, there's been increases, there seems to be increases every year for it. And unfortunately, the market is just at a place where we're trying to balance premiums with what that looks like. And Joel, you can probably talk a little bit more, but that's something that policyholders need to expect and understand, that this is a volatile marketplace in terms of pricing, and to be on the best side of that is so important to make sure you're not paying for anything extra than really you should be. Yeah, Joel, do you want to add on to that maybe a little bit? Talk about kind of the market space and what you've been seeing and noticing.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen some volatility with the increase in claims over the past 48 months. I will say that Coalition specifically is writing to around that 65% loss ratio. We're here to be here for a long time and to be there for our customers well into the future. And along with that, have our guarantee capacity arrangements in place with Swiss Re and Arch Re up until 2023. So it is a little bit crazy out there, right? I would just encourage you to partner with an insurance company that's there to be there for you in the long term.
And just to add on to that, as you mentioned, that capacity is at a limitation. There's a lot of people, a lot of a lot of insurance companies that are either pulling back on their capacity or stepping out of the cyberspace because if they don't have the same dedicated teams that over at, for example, Coalition, their entire business model is centered around this. They have FBI experts, all of these high end. They have underwriters followed by security analysts, as the next step above them to make sure like that doesn't happen in a, okay, sure, we'll do a little cyber add-on or a standalone cyber policy, and they don't have the infrastructure, the people that are in this space that are able to kind of manage that. So that's why working with, and why I was so excited for you to be able to join us on here is, Coalition has been incredible to work with from a broker standpoint, the knowledge that we're able to kind of pass along to the insureds. And you guys have been able to, to continuously provide that capacity, and we know that you're going to be in that game for a long run. I think is so important to make note of. All right, so it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So as we're at 1:18 here, kind of some final thoughts, maybe some different ideas and stuff that you want to toss out there to either of you. Floor is open, as it was the whole time, but.
No, I think we covered a lot of ground today. Thanks so much, Kara and Carson, for your invaluable input on this. This risk that is becoming the defining risk of our generation, and just to be able to listen and for you to provide guidance as to how somebody starts down that path of observing what my cybersecurity risk profile looks like, how do I improve it, how do I protect my business, and how do I protect my customers. So thank you to both of you.
I really enjoyed our conversation, and I love the fact that you shed some light on how insurance companies look at risk. Like, you're not just a premium. You're not just money paid out. It's how do you function? Who are the people behind your policy, and what kind of services are they providing? It's not just a premium. And I love that Coalition is specific to cybersecurity. And I think, Joel, you mentioned to me you're the largest insurtech company in North America, if not globally. You've just got this amazing company that has a great understanding of how to ensure our risks that are increasing in sophistication and rates. And you're on the cutting edge, bleeding edge of technology and risk mitigation. And I think it's so important that you that you partner with the right underwriter, with the right broker that understands your needs, that understands how to insure you, and to make sure that you're not overinsured. You know, a really great broker is not just trying to sell you something like some slick salesman. They really want to understand your business, and they want to understand all aspects of your business, including cyber insurance. So it's really critical to have a great trusted broker. I mean, these guys are your partners in business. They're your trusted advisors. They're not there to sell you just something so they can get a slick commission. They're there to help insure and protect your business, to educate you and keep you safe. So I really enjoy having these trusted relationships and these trusted partners. I mean, and it's been really great that you shared this time with us. I'm really thankful for that.
Absolutely. And I guess just to, echo those same things, to both of you, again, thank you so much for being able to come together on this. And I think the experience that, all three of us and kind of different faces of that all come together, and it's incredible to see this space and how fast it's growing. And you're absolutely right. We're not here for, especially from the broker side to, we're not just here as policy pushers, I think is the classic line. We really do want to be here for the long run. We want to be trusted advisors to your business and help however we can, because this is a very overwhelming for a lot of business owners. This is a terrifying, like, I don't want to look at it. I don't want to think about it, because as soon as I go down that rabbit hole, I am so over or out of my element. And I think that is where we want to be able to come in and help, and for those that are a little bit more technical, to get into the nitty gritty, and otherwise to know that we're working with you and to the best of our ability, and making sure that you're protected, and that you're setting yourself up for a very successful long run in business. Also, huge shout out to the Better Business Bureau for being able to help host this. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And it sounds like with every recording, it will be sent out, and we'll have access to that. So that's great in and of itself. Thank you, attendees, for everybody that was able to join on here, and whoever gets to see this in the future. Thank you for taking the time. This is a super important piece to talk about there.
Yeah, and just a quick thank you to the three of you. This was absolutely incredible. There was so much valuable information, and as Carson mentioned, we will share this. We'll email it out to everyone post the event here, and we'll get it up on the BBB YouTube channel within the next day or two. So yeah, thank you again to the three of you, and we look forward to getting this out to everyone. And if anyone has any last minute questions, pop those in there. Otherwise, feel free to connect with BBB on social media if you have any questions, and we can get those out to Joel, Kara, and Carson, or you can email them to julia@calgary.bbb.org. And I think that's it. So we'll just wrap it up here. Everyone have a great afternoon, and thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks
Take
so
care,
much for
guys.
having us.
Take care,
Thank
everybody.
you.